Westall, Mr. Roche.
Thank you. Well, friends, I'm the last speaker of the day, so my duty obviously is to be brief and be gone. But I cannot leave without telling Meta Spencer what a great job you did in organizing this conference.
Yeah.
I love you, Meta, but I have a little quarrel with your writer, who in preparing this document about today's program described me as a retired politician. Well, I can't think of anything worse than coming here as a retired politician than whom there is no one you want to hear from less. I am here at age 80 as an active citizen of the world who will, as long as I breathe, fight to abolish all nuclear weapons from the planet. Now, down to business. When surveyed public opinion shows that more than 3/4 of the people of the world want to have the elimination of nuclear weapons through an enforceable agreement, when the International Court of Justice in 1996 unanimously ruled that states must conclude negotiations to nuclear disarmament in all aspects under strict and effective international control, when all 187 states parties to the Non-Proliferation Treaty in 2000 unanimously made an unequivocal undertaking to the total elimination of nuclear weapons via a program of 13 practical steps, when 126 states 2 weeks ago in the UN First Committee voted to start multilateral negotiations leading to an early conclusion of a nuclear weapons convention prohibiting the development, production, testing, deployment, stockpiling, transfer, threat, or use of nuclear weapons and providing for their elimination. When UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon calls for states to negotiate a nuclear weapons convention, and as he says, backed by a strong system of verification that has long been proposed at the United Nations. When the Prime Minister of India, which shuns the NPT on the grounds of its discriminatory nature, pledges his country's participation in negotiations for a nuclear weapons convention, in his words, to eliminate nuclear weapons within a time-bound framework. When 3,241 mayors in 134 countries belonging to Mayors for Peace backed the Hiroshima and Nagasaki Protocol, calling for the adoption of a legally binding document banning all nuclear weapons by the year 2020, which is the 50th anniversary of the NPT and the 75th anniversary of the bombings. And all this is supported by the whole European Parliament, plus 700 worldwide members of Parliament for nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. When the Nobel laureate International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, mobilizing physicians in 62 countries, promote the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, ICAN, to mobilize civil society to demand a nuclear weapon-free world through the negotiation and adoption of a nuclear weapons convention, when 100 former heads of state, former foreign ministers, former defense ministers, former national security advisors, and more than 20 former top military commanders from around the world formed the new Global Zero organization to plan for the phased, verified elimination of nuclear weapons, starting with deep reductions in U.S. and Russian arsenals, to be followed by multilateral negotiations among all nuclear powers for an agreement to eliminate all nuclear weapons, Global Zero. When U.S. President Barack Obama, in his Prague speech of April 2009, stated his commitment to seek the peace and security of a world without nuclear weapons, and then convened an unprecedented summit of the UN Security Council to move the diplomatic process forward, well, in the face of all this high-level action, just giving you the evidence, one might well ask, why aren't we seeing the speedy elimination of nuclear weapons taking place? Why is the chain of events I have related not turning the tide of societal standards against these instruments of mass murder, which the former president of the International Court of Justice called the ultimate evil? The answer, as far as I can see, is that the sheer horror of nuclear weapons and the catastrophic economic, environmental, and human costs of their use have not yet penetrated public consciousness. Now, it is hard to find someone who actually thinks using nuclear weapons is a good idea. The subject seems still to be remote from daily concerns. Nuclear disarmament campaigners, as we know, are frequently relegated to the sidelines of society's concerns. In contrast, the campaign to stop or at least slow down global warming is a centerpiece of world attention. A parade of celebrities, reports, and green civil society actions have pierced the old media skepticism. And now society is running with the issue. Even recalcitrant politicians are trying to figure out how to catch up. The public, having absorbed the evidence of climate change, is demanding action. But with nuclear weapons, the public attitude is still clouded with various attributes of human behavior: denial, ignorance, apathy, and what the renowned psychiatrist Robert Lipton called psychic numbing. We shut out of our minds that which is too horrible to contemplate. To fully understand why the human psyche responds or doesn't respond to data requires the insights of a psychiatrist, which I do not possess. My knowledge is more elemental and gained from my public career. Politicians only move when they feel the heat from the street. This truism begs the question, because to generate heat on politicians, people themselves have to be moved, and that's what we're discussing in this session. So how do we do this? Well, I present three thoughts, which are by no means exhaustive, and when we go to questions and answers in a moment, perhaps you will join me in instructing this list. First, nuclear disarmament campaigners must first of all have confidence in ourselves, knowing that we are on the right side of history, and that historical momentum towards abolition of nuclear weapons is indeed building up. I just gave you a chain of events. The list of those elements that I reviewed shows clearly that societal attitudes are changing, even though moving to a nuclear weapons-free world represents a tectonic shift in how the world operates. For the very powerful are being asked to give up that which makes them very powerful. And this has never been done before in the history of the world. So we ourselves, as campaigners, must not become passive or grow tired or discouraged at the size of the mountain of the obstacles before us. Those who campaigned against slavery, against apartheid, against colonialism, never lost their determination that one day they would prevail. Confidence. Second, we must remember that public opposition to nuclear war, which has remained steadfast since 1945, has already, on numerous occasions, caused governments to step back from the brink. The nuclear historian Lawrence Whitmer, many of us read him, says evidence exists that public pressure has prevented nuclear war. In other words, we are not facing a situation in which, in calling for nuclear disarmament, we'd be going against public opinion. Quite the reverse. True, the military-industrial complex has hypnotized governments and the public that arms buildups are necessary, and so the arms merchants need continually to be exposed. Sleepwalking is undoubtedly a characteristic of our time, but once awakened from present lethargy, the public can roar to galvanizing politicians. That's our job. Thirdly, we must simplify our message. For too long, governments have bamboozled the public with the jargon and esoterics of the minutiae of faltering steps. I do not mean to diminish the work of diplomacy that works on the minutiae. I was there for myself, along with Chris. We did our best. But I tell you, from my diplomatic and political experience, this job will never get done if we entrust it to those who labor in the trenches of diplomacy and politics. We have to come up above that. And what we need is a single focused idea to get rid of all nuclear weapons in a safe and secure way. That's the beauty of a nuclear weapons convention, whose time has come. Been around for a while. The Model Nuclear Weapons Convention has been a UN document for 10 years. But now is the moment in which we see a way to connect the steps, yes, to a CTBT, yes, to an FMCT, yes, to de-alerting. Steps, of course, but with a visible intent to connect the steps to the vision and the goal of a nuclear weapons-free world. Obama has got that vision, and he's surrounded by people who are concentrating on the steps without the vision. It is a nuclear weapons convention articulated. I wish I'd brought that book that Alan Ware has turned out, The Security in Our Survival, which goes through in very helpful fashion how to deal with the exposition of a nuclear weapons convention. I call it to everyone's attention. A visible intent must be manifest by governments to connect the steps toward the goal. Our job is to lead the way in showing the connection, and not to take this spurious, phony argument from the government of Canada that a nuclear weapons convention discussion is premature. What an insult to our thinking. We have to turn that around. We have to turn that around. If a nuclear weapons convention is good enough for the Secretary General of the United Nations, it ought to be good enough for us. And he included it in his speech that Rebecca referred to on October 24th, a year ago. I think that a nuclear weapons convention has come, and we should press for it. And so, Murray, again, with Chris, I congratulate you. We're now up to 394 recipients of the Order of Canada. It'll probably go over 400 by the weekend, and it's on its way to 500. There'll be events and announcements and so on coming up. This is a tremendous achievement which shows that a cross-section of, let's be frank about it, important Canadians who have, as Chris said, not hitherto been identified with the movement, have come out and endorsed it publicly, the Nuclear Weapons Convention. This is an unprecedented development in our country, and shows that, yes, indeed, there is a public opinion, a very live public opinion, that we can build on in endorsing a comprehensive convention as a means for negotiating nuclear disarmament. The Canadian government must take note of it, and we must help many people out there on the streets whom our organizations are in contact with to manifest their opinion about it. It is our job as campaigners to energize the public. We must constantly appeal to the conscience of humanity to take steps to ban that which would destroy all life on the planet. There is a global conscience, and we must, through art, films, books, the internet, and all forms of modern communication, reflect, inspire, deepen, and utilize the feelings within all civilizations that the threat of mass killings cannot be tolerated. The time has come to wake up the Government of Canada. This conference could well inspire the government to action by the simple act of generating 5,000 letters to the Prime Minister calling for Canada to support a nuclear weapons convention. And I am here today calling on the co-sponsors of this great conference, the Canadian Pugwash Group, Science for Peace, Physicians for Global Survival, and the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace, all of whom have networks of people out around the country. Breaking that 5,000 down into the organizations and the provinces and groups, not a very big number at all. I think it would have an effect. And if 5,000 is not enough, then let it be 10,000 letters. Let the Prime Minister of our country hear from us. If we have taken the trouble to come to this conference, let us take an additional step in spurring the organizations that sponsor this thing to get that message out. Let us have a renewed Canadian campaign of public action to save the world from nuclear horror. And in doing this, we must believe in our own capacity to effect change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doug. Thank you very much.